Coming up on the Cam Show, Matthew Judon, more like it, traded to Atlanta. We'll have the reaction. Plus, Jarren Duran isn't an evil guy, but he's not a martyr. Can we stop doing that? And we wanted the USMNT to make a big splash, and Braden Murray is here to tell us that they did, in fact, make a big splash for their manager going into the 2026 World Cup. All that and more on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Music. It is the Cam Show powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Happy Thursday to you. If you watched the show yesterday, we went over the teams that could trade for Matthew Judon and whether that trade was imminent. Hours later, the trade happened. Now, it didn't happen with the Bears or the Texans or the Cowboys like we had, thrown names that we had thrown out there. But the trade did happen. Yesterday afternoon, Matthew Judon traded to the Atlanta Falcons for a 2025 third-round pick. Judon says, or the reports are, that there's nothing imminent right now in terms of a contract extension in Atlanta, but Matthew Judon's days with the Patriots are over. First reaction in terms of the return of it. Good return. I was thinking, a fifth and a sixth in a couple of years for a 32-year-old pass rusher on an expiring contract. You got a third next year. It's not bad. That's really not bad. In fact, according to Phil Perry of NBC Sports Boston, one of his sources, an executive in the NFL, was shocked to see the Patriots get such a good return, a third-round pick. This might be the first good move that we could tell anyway. Might be the first big move for Elliott Wolf as GM to trade a beloved player, but one who is clearly disgruntled and get a third-round pick out of it. That's what I'm still wondering about. This was a guy who, I don't know that Judon necessarily wanted out. He wasn't putting in a trade request like some players some pass rushers in the AFC East. He wasn't doing that, but he was clearly disgruntled. He wanted a new contract. And the more this went on, the more that looked like it was not going to happen. And there is something to the Patriots front office calling Judon a priority and trading him a couple of weeks before the season starts, 3 or 4 weeks before the season starts, and the in-between of extending all these other guys, right? Peppers and Stevenson and Barmore and Godshaw. All of them got extensions, but the guy who was the priority, Matthew Judon, did not, and now he doesn't play for them. In terms of what it does for the Patriots this year, it does stink in terms of his role got bigger for this upcoming season. When he's been on the field, he's been an excellent impact player, especially in the first 12 or so games of the season, and was looking like the vintage Matthew Judon last year before the injury that made him miss 13 weeks. This year, it looks like his role was going to be even more important after the Christian Barmore news. No one knows when he's going to play again. The blood clot thing, that is not something to mess with. He might not play football again. Who knows? But I doubt he's going to play for this team this year. And so from that standpoint, that's where you can question the Patriots a little bit. But when you could get something for him in the context that this team is in right now, they're not going to win a lot of games. They weren't going to win more than 4 or 5 games with Matthew Judon on the roster. They're not going to win more than 4 or 5 games with him on the roster. And in fact, from what we're hearing from joint practices this week and where this offensive line is at, what this quarterback situation is, and this offense, they might not win 2 or 3 games, let alone 4 or 5. This is a really bleak outlook for the Patriots right now. And if you're going to rebuild, then it's rebuilding time. And I would also say, if you're rebuilding time, what is the need to re-sign someone like Devon Godshaw? I don't know. I don't know. When you're in a rebuild, you can question any of these extensions. But I think we've seen Godshaw have some value, of course. Jabril Peppers, I think, has been their best defensive player the last 2 seasons. I'm a real big fan of Jabril Peppers. Ramondre Stevenson is about your only weapon on this offense, but not much of a weapon with the team he's playing around. So I don't know. But if you're going to do this rebuild thing, do it right. You got the best deal you could, I think, for Matthew Judon. Because from the Falcons side, this is exactly what you got for Hassan Reddick, by the way. You got a 3rd-round pick, which I guess could become a 2nd. And that's what you traded for Matthew Judon. That shouldn't add up. Those two shouldn't be the same. Because Reddick projects to be, is seen as a better player than Matthew Judon, although Judon's pretty good, and is younger than Matthew Judon. But same thing, pass rusher, expiring contract. And you got the same, you gave up the same for a guy who is 3 years older than Reddick and missed 13 games last year. Same deal. That is wild. Because from a Falcons standpoint, this is now investing in the 2024 season, which I get it. I do. But I think the Falcons are in a little bit too much of an all-in mode here. Okay? Because they haven't made the playoffs since they made the Super Bowl? Since they lost the Patriots in the Super Bowl? I think that's right. That's 8 years ago. And it hasn't been smooth sailing the last few years. You have some good young pieces. And then you went out and got Kirk Cousins. And it's like, okay, Falcons in the worst division in football. They have leveled up here. And they could be the team to beat in this terrible division. Carolina's awful. They're probably going to be the worst team in the league. New Orleans doesn't inspire anything with Derek Carr at quarterback. And the Bucs are okay and held on to Baker Mayfield. You went out there and got a better quarterback in Kirk Cousins. We're in good shape here if you're the Falcons. And then they draft Michael Penix in the top 10 for some reason. And which I've heard plenty of arguments for. I still don't really get it. Their thinking is we're not going to be picking in the top 10 or top 15 the next few years. So we got to go get the best guy now. That might be true this year, but afterwards, I don't know. When you look at, so they're in pole position to win this division. And look, once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. But they are right up against it in terms of the cap. Because the reason why there's no imminent extension in place for Matthew Judon, because currently the Falcons have about $29,000 in dead money in 2025. That's the amount that Justin Trudell was okay charging Kirk Minahan for a catering business from Saco to drive 10 hours. $29,000 in dead money is what the Falcons have this year, and $0 for 2026. So there's going to be moves being made after this season. They're going to be in cap hell. And I just don't know that it's worth it for one season. But then again, if you're looking at some bad seasons down the line here in a couple of years, and you haven't made the playoffs in a good while here, maybe it is worth it for the Falcons fans to say, yeah, we have one season where we're gonna make enough moves to guarantee you basically that we're gonna be in the playoffs, and once we're in the playoffs, anything can happen. I guess. But I think that's going to ruin a rebuild. And I think the deflection to that from Falcons fans would be like, we don't want another rebuild. So I get it and I don't get it. What I also don't get is, hey, we're going for it this year. We are firing Arthur Smith, which is what needed to happen. And we've got a chance to win this division next year and really go for it. You know who we should hire? Raheem Morris. And his career 300 winning percentage in the NFL. We're going to hire that guy. Is Belichick? No. Games passed him by. I would rather have Raheem Morris for a one-year thing than the best coach in NFL history for a one-year thing. where Belichick couldn't possibly fuck up the cap situation because it's already fucked up. And instead they went with Raheem Morris. So the Falcons are going all in for a, 10-7 year? Good luck, man. I mean, good for you guys. Matthew Judon is someone that was not going to play for the Patriots after this season. Could he have played a role for this team this year? Sure. But at the end of the day, play a role for what? You got a third-round pick out of him, which was better than any of the projections and is literally shocking, metaphorically, shocking general managers in this league. And you've got draft capital for what is now a rebuild. Because Robert Kraft said the other day, I don't know what the record's going to be, but I like where our coaching staff is at. Which is bullshit, but we all know that. This is a team that, for the first time in my life watching the Patriots, does not care about the record. And I'm not saying they don't care about their Week 17 game because they've already wrapped up a bye in the playoffs because we saw that a bunch. They don't care about the record this year. And they have got a island of misfit toys on that coaching staff. Guys who have not coached and been a guy who has not been a head coach in the league before. Guys who have not been in this position. A lot of green coaches out there. And a roster that is maybe worse than it was when you won 4 games last year. Because you don't know what you got out of quarterback for the, at least half of the season. You don't know what you have at quarterback. You lost now your best defensive player. Your other best defensive player through the first few weeks of last year, Christian Gonzalez, who got hurt at the same time. There are bad press clippings about Christian Gonzalez in these practices. You are right now a worse football team than you were last year. And that's a scary, scary prospect for a team that won 4 games and was the worst Patriots team in 25 plus years. I'm telling you, this is going to set us back to Rod Rust, Dick McPherson levels. This is going to be really, truly terrible. This is going to be pre-Kraft buying the team terrible. And I hope this will be a wake-up call to Bob Kraft. I doubt, no matter how bad it is, that they would fire Gerard Mayo after 1 year, but it's got to be a wake-up call to get this thing in order. The GM is in rebuild mode. Fine. But they should have been in rebuild mode 4 years ago when they drafted Mac Jones, and they didn't figure that out. And probably after 2022, they should have been in a rebuild mode. Not saying cut Mac off right then because he was hurt in that year and you didn't know what you kind of had out of him. But there were rebuilding moves that needed to be done that were not done the past few years. And that would be trading some of the other guys for a deal like this one. Didn't get it. And some people are saying, why didn't you get an offensive lineman in return? That's not how this works. You're not getting an offensive lineman right now. You're not going to. You're not going to get an NFL starting tackle at this point in the offseason. And you're not going to get him during the season either. You saw the market for what the Patriots can do for an offensive tackle. And it's this guy who's Okafor, whatever his name is, from Pittsburgh. A guy the Steelers were all too happy to push out the door because he had been benched in 2023. There is no market for tackles. You want to see the market for tackles? You're going to see it for 17 weeks this year when the Patriots have 0 and they win 2 or 3 games and they go and get the best guy in the draft. That's the market for tackles. And maybe, just maybe, fingers crossed, you could maybe even get the number 1 pick in the draft, trade it back, get some other draft capital, and still get the best tackle in the draft. But in terms of this Judon trade, like the player a lot, but also like that you were able to get a 3rd-round pick out of him. That's better than all the projections and better than what I thought. Jarren Duran is a player I like, but he is not your hero. He's not. That's coming up on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Jam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Jarren Duran has been all over the news this week, and he has served his 2-game suspension for yelling a homophobic slur at a fan behind home plate at Fenway Park. The fan was telling him, you need a racket. You need a tennis racket to hit. And Duran fired back with, an anti-gay slur that more or less rhymes with racket, actually. And now he has become something that he's not, and I don't think he wants to be. Jarren Duran is not a martyr. Okay? He's not. I don't think he's a bad guy. And to be honest, I don't even know that he's homophobic. But he's not a martyr. He's not a symbol of something. Conservatives, give it up. He's not that. Jarren Duran seems like a good guy. We hear great stories about him. I covered him somewhat in the Cape League. I was working for the same team he was playing for, and he seemed like a very nice guy. Not everything has to be like this giant culture war. The guy said something he shouldn't have said, and from both sides, it has become this massive deal. Like I was looking at Google this morning on this Jarren Duran stuff, and it's all these think pieces from left-leaning sites about how MLB has a homophobia problem, and that, growing up is hard enough, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, it's not any more than that. He said something he shouldn't have said. He said something that we've all said, by the way, at one point in our lives, but in 2024, as adults, we don't say that. It's not something that we should just go around saying. It's not an acceptable thing to say in decent society. It's not. But that doesn't mean MLB has a homophobia problem. Okay, because just about anyone growing up anywhere has said that word or called someone that, whether they meant it in the traditional sense or not, right? But that does not mean there's this greater cultural issue here. We're moving on. It was said a lot more in 2006 than it was said in 2024. It was said a lot more in 2012 and in 2018, 2019, and 2020 than it is in 2024. That is part of moving on. That is part of moving as a culture. It's not the deeper lying issue that you think it is. There is a homophobia issue. Of course there is. And there probably always will be. But it's also better than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago. That's progress. We're moving. We're moving from that. On the flip side, I'm seeing a lot of conservative fans, baseball fans, not just Red Sox fans. In fact, what I've seen on social media, a lot more than just Red Sox fans, who are making Jarren Duran out to be this hero. For what? For what? Like, I can see some of the conservative martyrs of the past, whether I believe in them or not. Like, I'm not a big Kyle Rittenhouse guy. I'm not. I don't really get it. But in a way, I do get what they're saying, or I'm trying to remember back in the day with like the Trayvon Martin case, Zimmerman. They felt this guy was getting persecuted for acting what they thought was rationally, right? What Jarren Duran did was not rational. It's weird in 2024 society. While we've all done it, if you got caught saying that on a hot mic today, you would understand that there's a punishment. And by the way, Jarren Duran understood there was a punishment. And he apologized for it. He served a suspension. He has not run amok with it. He has not, made a big stink about it. I think he understands that this is what happens and that he shouldn't have said that. We all say things in the heat of the moment that we shouldn't say. I think this was the one for Jarren Duran. But this is not a heroic act, and I don't understand why we're trying to push that. I don't understand why conservative baseball fans are trying to push that. I saw from this one Red Sox podcast on Twitter, which, by the way, is first off just not a good podcast, but also very annoying and, yes, very conservative. But to each their own. I really don't care. In fact, I lean more conservative much more than I do liberally. But this I just don't get. It's the bastards of Boston baseball. How's the woke crowd handling the news of Jarren Duran's jersey sales hitting an all-time record the last few days? Community note, fact checked. It's not an all-time record. It is the number one selling jersey on MLBshop.com this week. That's all part of this, of what I don't get. Jarren Duran's having a great year. I don't think that's why his jersey is bumped up in sales the week he called someone the F slur. Like, what? So if you bought a Jarren Duran jersey just for that, and people see that, you know, you're at a Phillies game wearing a Phillies hat and a Jarren Duran jersey, no one is thinking, oh, this guy loves free speech. They're thinking, this guy hates gays. He hates gay people so much that he went and bought a jersey of a guy he only knows because the guy said the F word. Does that not, like, that? Does that not seem fucked up to the people who are buying that? If you see it at Fenway, it's whatever. Jarren Duran is one of their best players. No wonder they bought a jersey. But clearly this is happening more than Boston if he's the number one seller on MLB Shop. That's fucked up. That's weird. That's a very weird hill to die on, a very weird thing to stand behind, to say, yeah, I'm into free speech, so I don't think this guy should have been reprimanded for publicly calling someone that gay slur. That's fucking weird, man. Are you going to defend people calling other people the N-word in 2024? Some of these people might, which is just really weird and quite icky, if we're being honest. Again, it's so weird to be living in the middle space here to say, I don't think Jarren Duran's a bad guy, and I don't even know that he's homophobic, and I don't think anything more should happen to him than what's already happened to him, a fine, a 2-game suspension, and a public apology. We move on. But I also don't think he is this great symbol of the free speech movement because he called someone that. That's such a weird angle to take. And a lot of people are taking that angle. I look at the comment section. It's just, it's incredible, man. Oh, I think it's wonderful. So many of these people. And there are some that come back. You know, it's not woke to be a decent person. It was a mistake and Duran owned it. That's a good way to talk about it. I don't understand why this is the thing we're rallying behind. Someone said more players need to be like him. Why? That is not a good thing in 2024. We should not be encouraging players to be discriminatory. That's insane. That's such a wild, weird take that there are people amongst us that still believe that. And one guy, again, measured comment here, he made a mistake, suspend him a few games. He apologized, set an example for kids and everyone that it wasn't acceptable, and then you move on. Oh boy, that was about the worst thing you could say in this thread. Suspend him because he says what all men say? This woke British cigarette culture can't disappear quick enough. Look, I've said it before. I said it at the beginning of the segment. We've all said that word. Most of us, if not all of us, have called people that word. I used to use that word a lot. I was also 11 and 12 years old. I was not a Major League Baseball player. I'm not the same age I am now, which is the same age as Jarren Duran. I'm not saying that at age 27. I grew up. I moved on. I used other words. I didn't keep using anti-gay words. It's so weird. So because people say that when they're teenagers, then you shouldn't get reprimanded for making your baseball team, your employer, look bad by calling somebody that in public? That doesn't make any sense. And I would use the example of, oh, well, if people said the N-word all the time. In history, and, we say it as kids talking about rap songs and stuff. Like, should you be allowed to say that now? The answer is obviously no, but this person would probably say yes. This guy should not be suspended because we've all said it before. Because you called someone that because they were pissing you off when you were 13 years old. It's insane to me that there are still so many people who are thinking that. And that seems to be the argument that I'm picking up, because please, if you guys know what the real argument is, drop it down in the comments. I don't know it. Or leave us a voicemail. Please. Link in the description for the voicemail. I don't know what the argument is because like young people say it and said it. I just don't get it. One of them says, we said a lot worse when I was growing up in the 90s. Correct. But we don't say it anymore. This is not you growing up in the 90s. It's 2024. They used to say the N-word all the time. We don't say it anymore. I don't understand this. Why he is now this hero. And by the way, Jarren Duran does not believe he is a hero. He doesn't think he's a hero. Why should we think he's a hero? The guy made a mistake. We're moving on. And I actually feel a little bit bad for Duran here because he's trying to move on. He clearly, I mean, you saw the apology. He looked embarrassed that this happened. And wouldn't we all be? Except for Terry Cushman and the great people of Bastards of Boston Baseball. That reviled podcast. But like, Duran seemed embarrassed by it. He does not want to be seen as this hero of the right or the free speech movement, which, by the way, seems conservative. But I just don't get it. Someone please explain it to me. Not why you hate woke or why you think this is woke, but why is he a hero? Why is he the face of the free speech movement? Why, if you're rooting for another fucking baseball team, why are you going to buy his jersey if he's not playing for your team? Please explain that to me. Jarren Duran is not a bad person, but he is not a hero for doing this. I really hope we can all move on from it, especially Jarren. Because, again, he seems like a good guy and is an important part of this baseball team, too. But it's going to be people like these bastards of Boston baseball and these insane people on Twitter who are going to give Red Sox fans a bad name, and they're going to give Jarren Duran a bad name, more so than the things he already did. Anyway, most of those people who are commenting that don't like soccer. So we're going to talk about soccer. Mauricio Pochettino to the USA with Bradon Murray. That's coming up next on The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Cam Show, Rogue Media Sports Network, Bradon Murray alongside. I could do a British accent for this one because we're talking football. Big time football news out of the United States of America. The USMNT is hiring Mauricio Pochettino to be their head coach, manager, whatever you like, and will lead them in to the 2026 World Cup on home soil. Bradon, you've heard of this guy.
I have heard of this guy.
So then, just right then, how big is that for you that they hired someone that you've heard of?
That's, it's an improvement from Greg Berhalter.
It's a good start, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts?
I will say that he was the manager of that PSG team that had Neymar, Mbappe, Sergio Ramos, and Messi, and the team that did not somehow win the Champions League, which is a little concerning.
Yeah, they won the league.
They did, but
for what that's worth. Yeah.
If you have a team of that talent, you probably should.
Yeah, and it's funny that he did get to the final with Tottenham and not PSG. I don't know. For me, that PSG thing, I think there's something deeper there.
What do you?
There have been some good managers there, and there have been some all-time great players, and they do not win the big one. Mm-hmm. They win the French league. That's great, and I'm not trying to denigrate that, but I am.
I'm not super familiar with the other teams in League One, but like, is it close usually?
Every couple years, it's close.
Okay,
and I mean every 4 or 5 years they don't win it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else won it a few years ago. Nice?
Okay.
That doesn't sound right. But yeah, every few years someone else will win it, and it's just a disaster at PSG. But for the most part, they win it.
Yeah.
It's like not quite the Bayern in Germany thing, but it's not far off. And so, yeah, they turn their attention towards the Champions League because it's something they've never won. And Poch did not get them there. They did win the league. I was reading one of the stories this morning that was like talking about how his style clashed with having 3 stars on the team and led to subpar results. I'm like, he did win the league. He did win the league. And that's one of those big oil clubs that is just such a mess to work for. Same with Chelsea, which was his most recent job, where did have a lot of talent. They did not have a good league standing. It was Graham Potter, it was someone else, and it was Pochettino in this past year for Chelsea, which is just typical Chelsea. Doesn't matter if it's Roman Abramovich or the American Todd Bowley. We're just going to run through managers like 3 a year. I've always been an admirer of Poch.
Okay.
I like his style. I think it's not too different to a Jurgen Klopp style. It's very press heavy. The wingbacks get really involved, and I think the U.S. has some good ones. Jedi Robinson, I think, is a good one. And I'm hoping that could help him, Robinson, as well as Pochettino. And one of the things that I think stood out in his managerial record was like developing young players. And that's what we've got.
We do.
You know, the U.S., as good as this generation is, it's never going to run into the issue that Pochettino had at PSG. I've got Neymar, I've got Messi, I've got all these star players, and they're not going to buy into my system. We're not going to have the issue of having Messi, Neymar, or Mbappe on the team. Okay?
Yeah, well, also, Messi and Neymar, they were old. Like, they're maybe not past their prime, but they're not.
True. Well, Neymar was like 30, maybe.
Well, 30 is not young in sports.
I guess, but he's not decrepit. Messi was, I guess, past his prime, but even then, hell of a player.
Even then, he won the World Cup that year.
Hell of a player. Hell of a player. And has won the Ballon d'Or since. So, yeah, I don't want to hold too much of the PSG thing against Pochettino. He did take Tottenham to the Champions League final.
That's the year that they lost to your Liverpool.
Yeah, that is.
You know what?
Yeah. June 1st, 2019.
As a future Premier League, current Premier League fan, because they play this week.
Yes.
Do the teams have mascots? Because I wanted to say, like the Houston Texans, does the Liverpool have?
You're trying to make this American. You're really
is
trying
it just,
to make this American.
I want to say the Liverpool blah.
Most of the teams have nicknames. Yeah. Liverpool would be the Reds.
Okay.
If Manchester United tries to say that the Reds don't believe them, there's only one team that wears red top, red shorts, red socks. That's Liverpool. The Reds. Red Devils would be Manchester United. Aston Villa would be the Villains.
Okay.
There you go.
Mark Vidal.
Sure.
Villain.
Yeah. Tottenham Hotspurs, usually just Spurs. You could hear some people say the Lily Whites.
I've never heard that before.
It's their color, Lily Whites.
Okay.
They wear white shirts. Let's see some of the Arsenal, the Gunners.
Yeah, I know. I've heard that one
because of the gunnery. Chelsea more or less go by the Blues. City, the Sky Blues or the Citizens.
Wolverhampton is easy. They're just
the Wolves. Yeah, Wolverhampton Wanderers. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones because this is good. This is good radio. Southampton, where Pochettino once managed. That's the Saints.
Okay.
Play at St. Mary's. The Magpies or the Toons of Newcastle. The Toffees, Everton. The Hammers or the Irons, West Ham. What were some of the other teams you were looking at? Burnley. I don't know Burnley's.
Oh.
I don't know them.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of them.
I think you named all the teams that I was looking at.
Probably, since we got rid of Burnley then. Yeah, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Yeah, probably. The Black Cats, Sunderland.
Okay.
It's a good one.
What about Crystal Palace?
The Eagles. The Seagulls would be Brighton. Brighton and Hove Albion. Just Brighton is fine. Brentford, the Bees. It's usually like just what appears in their crest.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the ones I can think of right now. Anyway, back to Pochettino. Pochettino because I do want to bring up his Southampton days. He was there only a couple seasons. Sorry, just one. I was thinking it was 1.5. One season, they finished 8th and then took on Tottenham. And Tottenham was a mess when he took over. They had some young talent. They had a kid named Harry Kane. They had just got rid of Gareth Bale. They had some talent, but it was a rough situation. And he took them to quite respectable. I think they finished second in 2016. Maybe it was 2017, or maybe it was both. And then went to the Champions League final in 2019, which was this incredible run. They knocked out City away in the quarterfinals in just this unbelievable finish where Aguero had scored the winner but was offside on VAR. And then they get shellacked by Ajax in the first leg. This was this great young Ajax team with Matthias de Ligt and Frankie de Jong. And they had so many pieces. And they were down, it must have been, 3-0 on aggregate in the second half of the second leg. And Pochettino, stroke of genius, put Lucas Moura on for the second half, and he scores a second half hat trick, stoppage time winner, which leveled them on aggregate. But this was back in the glorious day of away goals tiebreaker, and went to the final. And they did lose to Liverpool. But to take Tottenham that far was incredible at the time, especially because Tottenham was not known for having any depth. And it's real tough to finish in the top 4 like they did in the league and also make the Champions League final with no depth, no bench. And he did that. And
I remember that
year after year he was doing that.
That finals game being incredibly boring.
It was not a great advert for the English game. Yeah, 2-0.
Usually when people say that soccer is, or football, is boring, I say, what? You're just watching the wrong game. And I had a hard time defending that game.
Which was funny because both of those teams were coming off unbelievable high-scoring semifinals. Liverpool had the 3-0 comeback in theirs.
You won 2-0, right?
Yeah. Yep. Penalty in the first minute, and then Origi scored in about the 88th or 89th minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was not a lot of action going on in between. But Poch, he's got a style. He is good at developing young players. And to me, that is an important thing. Even though he's never coached a national team, that's not uncommon for a big time national team opening to pick someone who has not picked a national team or coached a national team. Excuse me. I a month and a half ago was calling for Greg Berhalter's job on this show and saying it is time to bring in someone that we know, someone that doesn't necessarily have to be American, just someone that's the best for the job and can work with a generation of young players. And Pochettino checks off both those boxes. The other thing I was looking for was a style. Just a style of play. I think that's something that's hurt England. Gareth Southgate kind of has a style, but it's not a good one. Okay? I need someone who has a way of playing, a style that they actually use and have used to success. Pochettino has that. And I think it's a good hire. I really do. It's not Klopp. It's not Pep. It's not Mourinho. Those are always going to be tough, but it's also not Bruce Arena for the 4th time or whoever the LAFC guy is. I am thankful that if they're going to go down, it's going to be with Mauricio Pochettino, a guy who has won at high levels of European football, has transformed clubs like he did with Tottenham and took them right to the precipice. Didn't quite get over the hump, but got to the precipice. The fact that Tottenham Hotspur were at a Champions League final is incredible. He was the guy. And I like that he doesn't have to work with a deep bench because I don't know how deep the bench is for the U.S. compared to some of these other teams at the World Cup that they're going to be going against. And that his teams are malleable. He can take guys you haven't heard of and make them into real contributors. With his style of play. So I'm in on it. I know there's some pushback here. You've mentioned a little bit of it. He didn't win the Champions League with Tottenham, or he didn't have this team with generational talent and win with them at PSG. The stretch at Chelsea was not great. He did get them to a League Cup final. They didn't win it. They lost to Liverpool, but it wasn't a great year for Chelsea whatsoever. And he was part of it. Not all of it, but part of it. So I get that. And still some would say he has never coached a national team. But the names that we heard throughout this process, none of them had coached a national team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's as important as a guy who has succeeded at a high level of football, national or not, national team or not, and a guy who has a defined system and style of play. And that's what you got with Mauricio Pochettino. Matt Crocker is the sporting director for U.S. Soccer, the Welsh guy. He used to run Southampton. He hired Pochettino at Southampton. So there you go. There's your link. Is the U.S. going to win the 2026 World Cup?
No.
Why not? Bradon, why not? You're a hater, man. You hate this country.
I don't hate this country, but I don't think that...
Home field advantage.
They had that in this Copa America.
No, well, that's way in the past, Brad. That's way in the
That was
past.
a month
That
ago.
was Greg. That was the Greg tenure.
Berhalter.
I don't think the Greg tenure.
No, I think the world is... I think we're still catching up.
You think so?
Yeah. I don't know if we'll win a World Cup in my lifetime.
There was this guy. Probably not. What will come first? All right. Quick question. What's going to come first for you? U.S. winning the World Cup? Baylor football national championship. I'm going to take the field on that one personally. I wouldn't be surprised if neither one happens in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think Baylor football would be more likely to win a national championship than U.S. winning World Cup.
Maybe.
With 12-team playoff, you never know.
Yeah, I guess. But then the World Cup is like a 16-team playoff.
Yeah, I think is there 48 this year?
Yeah, but I've seen like the knockout stage.
Wouldn't there be more in the knockout stage?
I think. Oh, yeah, you're right. But aren't they doing like the teams who finish like top of the group would get a bye? Am I right?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Anyway, you're right. It's more than 16 now. You're right. There's this guy
Which
my
I think
dad
is
worked
dumb.
with for
Sorry.
years who loved like obscure sports
Mm-hmm.
and would like. He'd be like, my dad would be like, "Hey, what you got going on this weekend?" He'd be like, "I'm going to the field hockey Final Four, D3," like stuff like that. And he's a big soccer fan. I'm a big soccer fan, but he was a big like MLS, New England Revolution fan. And he would always say, "Oh, Bill," he'd go to my dad, "Bill, you gotta get onto this. It's the sport of the future." And my dad would say back, "Yep, it's the sport of the future, and it always will be." In this country, that might still be true.
I think MLS fans are sickos.
They are. They're an interesting bunch, and I give them all the credit. I wish I could get behind.
Yeah.
My local MLS team, the Revs. I just have no interest in it. I got way into soccer and still never gave the Revs a second thought.
Apologies if you are an MLS fan watching.
Kudos to you, man. Yeah, and part of it is the thing we've talked about before, and I think we talked about yesterday too. Like Gillette Stadium in Foxborough with 70,000 people, and it's half full, and like that's not the soccer to me. That's not the soccer atmosphere for me.
Yeah.
And it is for some people, and they've got a good fan section behind the goal, and it's 30 yards from the actual net. It's just that's. I mean, you'll probably realize that when you start getting into Premier League more. You're like, this is distinctly soccer, the way this atmosphere is. And it's really, really cool. And it's tough for me to then watch, Real Salt Lake take on the Revs at Gillette Stadium. Yeah, it's tough. And there are some of these MLS places that are soccer-specific stadiums, and they do it really well. Kansas City is a big one.
Dynamo have a soccer specific.
Yeah, I don't know how the crowds are.
Neither do I. I haven't been in like a decade, but
because there are like some that have this, 20,000 seater soccer specific, and 20 or 25,000, and they'll punch it out, and it looks great. And
I want to go to an Austin FC.
Those look incredible, by
yeah.
the way. I have some friends who go and say it's awesome, and I go to the Liverpool club down there. And so there's a lot of overlap. But anyway, until it's that, I can't. And the Revs are talking about they've been talking about it for years and years about building a soccer-specific stadium in Seaport, Boston. So I doubt that will happen. But if it did, that might actually help my fandom. I don't want it coming out of my taxes if I eventually live there, but it might help my fandom. Anyway, Pochettino, USA, yay or nay? Thumbs up, thumbs down, Bradon. Thumbs up from Bradon Murray. That's big. That's huge. Bradon?
Yes.
I think that's all I got for today.
Okay.
Is
Matthew
that okay?
Judon, a Falcon. That's pretty cool. Or bad for y'all. All right for y'all.
I mean, I said it in the open. Like it doesn't do anything to the Patriots' record this year, and you're only going to have him this year anyway. So I always really liked Judon. Honestly, I did and do. And I think I maybe I'm naive. I actually think he's going to be productive again, coming off missing 13 games. But you got a better pick than all of the experts thought you were going to. He was clearly disgruntled, and I don't even know if he was going to take you from a 3-win team to a 4-win team. And based off what we're hearing at practice this week, they might be a 1 or 2-win team. So they're going to suck either way. That's Bradon Murray. I'm Cam Stewart. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Cam Show. We'll be back tomorrow. Probably.
We are Rogue Media Sports.